Major breaking news tonight, the fall of Kabul as the Taliban completes its takeover of Afghanistan. Armed fighters broadcast live from inside the presidential palace as the Afghan leader flees. Chaos in the streets as Taliban forces enter Kabul and take over the government. Thousands of prisoners set free, including members of al-Qaeda. The race to get out, U.S. military helicopters shuttling Americans from the embassy to the airport, warned to shelter in place amid reports of gunfire. The Pentagon today sending in 1,000 more U.S. troops. And we are with desperate Afghans trying to escape the country. Richard Engel is on the ground covering it all.
We've seen some gunmen who look like Taliban on the streets.
President Biden facing fierce criticism for his decision to withdraw U.S. forces amid fears the country will once again turn into a safe haven for terrorists. Unfathomable loss. Rescuers searching for any survivors of that massive earthquake in Haiti. Hundreds dead, thousands injured, and now a major storm is barreling that way. And the battle over vaccine mandates, new protests across the country, and beginning tomorrow, New York City will require proof of vaccination to enter any bar or restaurant.
This is NBC Nightly News with Kate Snow.
Good evening. I'm Peter Alexander in for Kate. And tonight, an abrupt and devastating end to America's longest war. 20 years after U.S. forces first arrived in Afghanistan, the Taliban completing its stunning takeover in little more than a week. Its commanders and armed fighters now parading through the presidential palace in Kabul just hours after the Afghan president fled the country. The capital city tonight filled with desperation and fear. The U.S. military racing to evacuate all Americans amid reports the only way out, the airport, was taking fire. We are covering this from all angles tonight, and we begin with Richard Engel in Kabul.
The Kabul airport is the only safe way out of Afghanistan. And today there was nearly a run on it. Afghans who could get visas rushed to foreign countries. For the United States, the airport is the staging ground to evacuate U.S. embassy personnel. Helicopters and airplanes circled over Kabul, shuttling between the embassy, where sensitive documents were burned, and the airport as the Taliban closed in. The militants had already taken every city except Kabul, mostly without fighting. U.S. trained and equipped Afghan soldiers just melted away. By early afternoon, the Taliban's advance got even stronger. They broke into Kabul's main jail, freed thousands of prisoners, and instantly added them to their ranks. Afghans saw what was coming. The American evacuation does not apply to the vast majority of Afghan citizens. I went to an office in a shopping mall packed with Afghans struggling to fill out the State Department's webpage for visa requests. Most people here worked for the U.S. military in minor roles, like cooks, cleaners, and guards. Afghans swarmed around me, thinking that as an American, perhaps I could help. They showed me documents proving their employment history.
So everyone showed up with their ID cards, pictures of their phone, other IDs, recommendation letters, employment contracts, and they're hoping that all this paperwork will be enough to get them a visa immediately so they can get out of this country.
Others came here because they're terrified of the Taliban and didn't know where else to go.
She doesn't have any connection to the U.S. She's just here out of desperation. She's saying, please do something. Take my son.
They were right to be worried. By late afternoon, the Taliban made a brief incursion into Kabul, probing. They met no resistance. Kabul would be a walkover. Just hours later, seeing the writing on the wall, and likely saving his life, President Ashraf Ghani escaped the country. It was game over.
Kabul is falling now. We've just left our office, our longtime home in Afghanistan, and we're heading to a safer location, what we hope will be a safer location. Already we've seen some gunmen who look like Taliban on the streets, and all of the government checkpoints, all the police, all the soldiers, they're gone.
It was done. After 20 years, the Taliban took Kabul and Afghanistan almost effortlessly. By nightfall, the Taliban seized the presidential palace. Al Jazeera broadcast pictures of them inside Afghanistan's equivalent of the Oval Office, while the United States scrambled to evacuate, an inglorious end to a 20-year war.
The evacuation of Americans is continuing tonight, but it has been interrupted by sporadic gunfire, the embassy telling Americans to shelter in place. So it seems the Taliban do want the U.S. to withdraw under fire. Peter?
Richard Engel in Kabul tonight. Richard, please stay safe. And the Pentagon announced late today that they will send in another 1,000 U.S. troops in addition to the 5,000 already there or en route to help get Americans out. We want to bring in Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell. And Andrea, how many Americans are there right now and what is their status?
Well, there are 500 who've already left the airport, out of the country. There are a couple of thousand more Americans we know, embassy personnel and others who are still there, most secured at the airport, but the evacuation of the embassy itself is still ongoing, we're told tonight. And there are also, of course, those SIVs, the Afghans who helped American military. I've got to tell you, after being in that palace so many times with U.S. officials, visiting diplomats, seeing the Taliban there, it's a shock how quickly this came. A shock to everyone.
So many evacuations and so little time to get it done. Andrea Mitchell, thank you very much. And tonight, President Biden is watching the deteriorating situation unfold from Camp David and consulting with his national security team as he is facing fierce criticism for both his decision to withdraw U.S. troops and how it is being executed. Monica Alba is at the White House.
As Afghanistan falls to Taliban control, the Biden administration stands by its plan to leave.
That is the hard decision the president made.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken insisting there's not much more the United States can do.
Ultimately, it's up to the Afghans themselves. It's up to the Afghan government. It's up to the Taliban to decide the way forward for the country.
Now conceding the Taliban's advances have been far faster than even he forecasted in June.
I don't think it's going to be something that happens from a Friday to a Monday.
Placing blame on the Afghan security forces.
Tragically, they have not been able to defend the country, and I think that explains why this has moved as quickly as it's moved.
And pointing the finger at the Trump administration's deal with the Taliban to withdraw American forces by May of this year.
The idea that we could have maintained the status quo beyond May 1st if the president had decided to stay, I think is a fiction.
Candidate Biden promised to bring troops home. And President Biden guaranteed last month there would be no airlifts from the embassy in Kabul, saying it was not at all analogous to the messy exit from Vietnam 4 decades ago.
This is manifestly not Saigon.
Still, helicopters continuously evacuated Americans and our Afghan allies to the airport throughout the day, an optical comparison Republicans have seized on as they continue to blast the president's foreign policy strategy.
This is going to be a stain on this president and his presidency, and I think he's going to have blood on his hands for what they did.
This has been an epic failure across the board, one we're going to pay for years to come.
And Monica joins us now. Monica, are there any plans for President Biden to address the nation?
Not currently, at least not tonight, Peter. The White House weighing that day by day, with officials acknowledging the American people want to hear from him. For now, the president remains at Camp David, where he has been largely out of view since Friday. Peter?
Monica Alba at the White House, thank you. The war in Afghanistan is America's longest ever. $2 trillion spent and thousands of lives lost, leaving many Americans today wondering, what was it all for? Megan Fitzgerald has more.
More than 2,400 flag-draped coffins returned home from Afghanistan. The nation honoring our heroes who sacrificed it all in America's longest war, starting in 2001 when the World Trade Towers were attacked.
We will stay until the mission is done.
The mission to defeat al-Qaeda and kill its leader, Osama bin Laden, ultimately accomplished, driving out the Taliban and building an Afghan government that can survive on its own.
We will stand with you as you defend your new democracy.
It was a commitment lasting 20 years, costing the U.S. more than $2 trillion.
Americans' commitment to you and to a secure, stable, and unified Afghanistan, that remains firm.
Afghans will secure and build their own nation and define their own future.
We have trained and equipped a standing force of over 300,000 Afghan personnel today.
More than 600,000 troops deployed multiple times, working to train the Afghan army as American military leaders promised they would one day be ready.
The bulk of this country today is permissive, it's secure.
We are building Afghan security forces that are on track to take the lead for securing the entire country.
They have capable ground, air, and special operations forces.
but only weeks after most U.S. troops pulled out of the country, defeat.
How do you feel about what's happening in Afghanistan right now?
I'm brokenhearted about it. I hate to think that everything we did out there was in vain.
Denise Giannette's son was a medic who served 4 years in Afghanistan and was killed on the front lines. Her son and his comrades will always be heroes. They fought to help a country that was unable to help themselves. Megan Fitzgerald, NBC News.
Those past 20 years have been filled with violence, but also hope and opportunity for women in Afghanistan. But now as the Taliban regains control, there are new fears those militants will reimpose their strict, often brutal treatment of women. Kelly Kobiea spent the week in Kabul talking with those who are now facing a very uncertain future.
In Afghanistan, girls are used to dreaming big.
I'm a doctor. I am
Dentist.
I'm a doctor.
Another doctor. For them, going to school is normal.
You have many students. 8,402 students.
So is coping with a constant threat from men who don't want them to learn. They say you might die, but I try to keep the girls motivated to study, the principal tells me. Under the Taliban in the 1990s, women and girls were banned from work and education, shrouded, kept out of public life. But for 20 years now, they've lived out in the open, many free to make their own choices. They've seen huge gains in education, equal rights, politics, simple things like shopping alone. All now at risk as the country could plunge back into the darkness of Taliban rule. Politician and activist Fawzia Kufi grew up under the Taliban and was an envoy to the stalled peace talks. She survived 2 assassination attempts and still sat across the negotiating table from the Taliban. But it's her fear for the next generation of girls that she can't bear.
Women in Afghanistan are the most at danger or at risk population of the country. By those who were upset with women becoming powerful in the last 20 years.
I don't know whose fault this is, the principal tells me. This is the tragedy of Afghanistan. Fakriya was 19 when the Taliban took over. She fled to Pakistan. Her daughter is 19 now.
Would you leave the country again?
What should I do here? It's like that you cannot breathe. It's like that life doesn't have any meaning for you.
But there is some hope, these women say, in a younger generation not willing to give up what they've gained. Kelly Kobiea, NBC News, Kabul.
And still ahead tonight, we're in Haiti after that catastrophic earthquake that left more than 1,000 people dead. Also, the 1-2 weather punch bearing down on Florida. Now to the other major story today, Haiti, where more than 1,000 people have been killed with thousands more injured after that devastating earthquake that rocked the country. Search and rescue efforts are being slowed by powerful aftershocks there, and now another threat looms. Gabe Gutierrez is there.
Tonight, a frantic search for survivors is underway after the massive earthquake that ravaged southwestern Haiti. The race against time is even more urgent with Tropical Storm Grace barreling toward the country.
A lot of damages, a lot of dead and injured people. And for the moment, it's really hard for the Haitian people.
Today, the death toll here more than tripled, skyrocketing to more than 1,000, and these 3,000 people were injured. U.S. search and rescue teams and the Coast Guard are rushing in supplies as the Haitian government declares a state of emergency.
Se necesita mucha asistencia.
A lot of help is needed, this aid worker says, as he flies out victims. Haiti was already reeling from the brazen assassination of its president last month, intensifying gang violence, an out-of-control pandemic, and a spiraling economic crisis. The 7.2 magnitude quake Saturday morning was even stronger than the 7.0 quake that struck Haiti in 2010, killing an estimated 250,000 people. But this one's epicenter was not as close to the capital, the country's most populated area. Still, there have been at least 17 confirmed aftershocks, and there are fears here the death toll could keep rising.
It was unbelievable. And then people just started screaming everywhere on the streets and just out of, panic and fear.
Betty Jabrain lives in Jeremy, near the epicenter. With an impending tropical storm, the situation is growing more dire.
for people that have limited resources, have houses that aren't well constructed, and knowing full well that there was a tropical storm coming in the next 3 days.
The Biden administration has just placed USAID Administrator Samantha Power in charge of coordinating the U.S.'s response here in Haiti. Today, she deployed a search and rescue team with specialized tools to help aid the search for survivors. Peter?
Gabe Gutierrez in Port-au-Prince, Haiti tonight. Gabe, thank you. And we're back in a moment with the intensifying protests against new vaccine mandates, plus thousands evacuated as a Utah fire explodes in size. We're back now with the accelerating COVID crisis here at home. Tonight, the country's fight against the surging Delta variant is overwhelming hospitals. And it comes as major U.S. cities gear up to require proof of vaccination for some indoor activities. Kathy Park has the latest.
Tonight, the COVID crisis overwhelming hospitals out west. In Utah, the state's largest healthcare system is struggling to keep up, stretched thin, treating mostly unvaccinated patients.
So we're full. Completely full. This is not a place that we want to be.
And nationwide, pediatric cases are growing at an alarming rate, too. Nearly 94,000 new infections in a week, roughly a 400% increase in a month as more kids head back to school. Recent outbreaks in Georgia now forcing several counties to suspend in-person learning.
Teachers can't plan. They have to teach the face-to-face students. They also have to teach the kids who are quarantined, so they're doing double duty.
And the debate over vaccine mandates boiling over. In Kentucky, protests over vaccine requirements for healthcare workers. In Los Angeles, one person was stabbed during a clash outside City Hall between pro and anti-vaccination demonstrators. And in New York City, protesters blocking roads outside the mayor's residence, a day before the city becomes the first to require proof of vaccination at indoor restaurants, entertainment venues, and gyms.
It's about saving human life. It's not about money in the short term.
The rule applies to both customers and workers who can show their vaccination status through an app or vaccine card.
If you're unvaccinated, unfortunately, you will not be able to participate in many things. That's the point we're trying to get across.
But few details have been shared on how to follow the new mandate and penalties for noncompliance. Restaurant owners hit hard by the pandemic say it's adding more to their plate.
The hospitality industry consistently becomes the scapegoat for everything COVID.
And Kathy joins us now. Kathy, New York isn't the only city asking for proof of vaccination before entering indoor establishments.
Peter, that's right. The list is growing. The mandate goes into effect tomorrow in New Orleans, later this week in San Francisco. Los Angeles is also considering a similar plan. Peter?
Kathy Park, thank you very much. And out of that threatening forecast tonight, a tropical storm warning is in effect for most of the Florida Panhandle as the system named Fred regains strength as a life-threatening tropical storm. Later in the week, tropical depression Grace may follow directly in Fred's path, delivering what could be a 1-2 punch to the Florida Keys. And out west, more than 6,000 homes in Utah are being evacuated as the Parlay's Canyon wildfire burns through large parts of that state. The flames have consumed over 1,500 acres and remained 0% contained. Crews were pulled from wildfire duty in other areas to help fight that fast-moving fire. When we come back, the powerful moment when a man received a surprise gift that will save his life. There is good news tonight about an incredible selfless act and one man's gratitude after learning that he was going to receive the kidney donation that he so desperately needs.
Carrie Kimball had a surprise, so she snuck into the backyard of an extended family member and waited. This is the moment Bob Scarborough learned Carrie is going to save his life.
Really? Oh my God! Oh my God!
Bob, a New Hampshire retiree, has battled kidney disease since his 20s. How hard has it been for you dealing with this kidney disease?
It's been very hard. I take 12 pills in the morning and 5 pills at night.
Last year, with one kidney removed and the other failing, doctors told Bob he needed a donor fast.
I'm about to tell Bob I'm his kidney donor.
That's when Carrie stepped up.
I just said, well, I'll get tested. No doubt in my mind whatsoever.
In simple terms, for you, this was a no-brainer.
It was. It really was, and it still is.
Carrie wanted a big reveal to announce she would be his donor.
I've been keeping this secret for a year.
You don't know.
I just found out.
You don't know. You don't know what this means to me.
That video now seen more than 10 million times. The surgery expected in the next couple months.
It's okay. He can come hug you. He can come hug you if he likes.
Oh, boy.
What's that hug feel like?
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. And that's what I want people to have. I want them to know that they're doing something good. They're helping somebody live.
Bob at a loss for words then.
You don't know what this means to me.
But not now.
In that moment, you said to Carrie, you don't know what this means to me. Tell me now, what does this mean to you?
It means life. That's the only way I could really put it. It means life.
The pair forever bonded, thanks to an incredibly selfless act.
So happy for Bob and for Carrie. What a difference a donor makes. That is NBC Nightly News for this Sunday. Lester Holt will be in tomorrow. I'm Peter Alexander. For all of us here at NBC News, have a good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.